Welcome to Way Over Our Heads. It's a weather and climate podcast. Kenny Blumenfeld is a climatologist. Kenny, how you doing?
Oh, I am swell. How about you, Jim?
You know, it's great. I've been enjoying this wonderfully mild weather. I understand we broke a couple of records the last couple of days here, meaning Friday and Saturday.
You like the mild weather, do you?
Well, I've got to say, I'm not like you. I don't embrace winter in the same manner that you do, by any means.
I mean, I don't mind it. I think everybody enjoys being able to walk outside and live.
Right. I
think that,
right.
You know, I think people enjoy that.
Come back with your appendages all in one piece. Yes, exactly.
Yes. But I do enjoy a good winter, but you have to help me with my dates.
Okay, that would be Friday, yes. Friday would have been the 4th, yes.
Friday the 4th broke a record in the Twin Cities, and also many stations throughout Minnesota were just the warmest they'd ever recorded on that particular day. 47 in the Twin Cities. You had upper 30s up on the Canadian border, though. I mean, it was pretty absurdly warm. And then we were actually supposed to cool down a bit on Saturday, but that didn't quite happen. So we ended up at the same 47. And that tied a record. So we had a broken record. And really, the one we set on Friday in the Twin Cities was, I think the Weather Service had called it low-hanging fruit. That's accurate. It's one of the lowest, if not the lowest, high-temperature record available throughout the calendar. So the record had been 41. We didn't have, I don't believe you'll find a record high temperature for any day in the Twin Cities that is lower than that value. So that was kind of ripe for the picking.
Right.
And we took it out with a vengeance, 47 instead of 41. So that was a big margin. And then on Saturday, we tied the record, which was also 47 for that day.
Well, on Saturday the 5th, it was a nice, bright, sunny day, and my wife was commenting to me, she said, does the sun seem brighter to you than it normally does? And I thought, I don't think it's going into supernova phase, so it did seem brighter. Is that simply because maybe from a psychological perspective, we haven't seen much of it for the last several months?
It seemed a lot brighter because you could see the dang thing.
Right.
We haven't had a lot of that this winter. Yeah, it was... we don't have a lot of snowpack, but where the sun does, when it shines, where it does hit the snowpack, it's like having two suns out there. So she might have been noticing that.
Okay.
But also, it was a mostly clear day.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So there weren't even clouds blocking out the sun, which is something we've had a lot. So having the sun was probably helpful. And then, we went into the end of the weekend. We remained warm, but without that sunshine, we just could barely muster 30s.
Well, we're going to talk today about what has happened to our 2018-2019 winter. We're going to tap some historical statistics to tell the story here. But first of all, Kenny, let's talk a little bit about how we have assembled those historical records. Minnesota has climatological records going back quite a ways. Are we somewhat unusual in that respect, that we have a pretty good record of what's happened in the last 150 some years?
Yeah, I mean, so the Twin Cities has a very long, what we call threaded record, which just means, there obviously hasn't been an airport where it is for the entire time, and there weren't even airplanes at the beginning of the record, but we've been able to assemble a threaded record that goes back, we're getting close to 150 years. You can get your first, I believe they're temperature readings from the old Twin Cities station going back to 1871, and precipitation was also in the early 1870s, and then we got snow in the mid-1880s. Duluth, we have some decent records, but again, it was not from a static location.
Right.
I would say that we're up there. We're up there with even some states on the East Coast in terms of having good, high-quality, long-term observing. Of course, the problem, as you know, Jim, is that we have a nice long record in the Twin Cities, but the Twin Cities have become quite urbanized. It's not appropriate to massage those data directly and try and massage the urban signal out of the data. And so you kind of have to look to other places. So Minneapolis is great in that we have a long record, and it's especially useful for precipitation comparisons. It does challenge us a bit when we're looking at temperature records because, urban areas, they lead to warmer conditions, especially when the sun is out and then in the evening after the sun has been out. So you get these warmer nights and you also get warmer kind of hot days. And we do see that in our records. So we know there's an urban signal in there. So that's one of the drawbacks, but fortunately we have other places. And in fact, in Minnesota, the town of Milan, it's Milan. A lot of people would assume it's Milan, but I think
Right.
the fact that most people would assume that just proves that it's a small town without an urban heat island. And this is actually essentially it's a farmstead. And for 3 generations, they've been taking records there. And they've now done it for 125 years.
And we should make this clear. These are not paid professionals. These are strictly volunteers and several generations of a family that have carried on this responsibility.
Correct. The National Weather Service in the Chanhassen just honored the Opp Jordan family from Milan, Minnesota, for this 125 years of volunteer weather record keeping. Now, this program, it's not like they just raised their hand or just decided out of the blue to do this. This is a federal program, and it's old. It's been around for a while. Those of us who work in climatology are always concerned about the fate of this program because people aren't nearly as efficient, so some would say, as automatic weather stations. But anybody who's studied the climate knows that in most cases, manual, or in other words, visually observed climate data tend to be superior to the automatically observed or the automatically registered climate data. So we're really lucky to have some of the readings that we have out in Milan and some of the other locations. But just to put them in perspective, and I don't want to bore everybody talking about the history of climatology, but it's 125 years is rare. I believe there are only 8 other locations in the whole country that have been at it that long. So it's quite helpful that they're doing this.
Well, let's talk about some of the records. We're going to talk about temperature records and how they correlate to snowfall or the lack thereof during a winter season. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I'm a dork, Jim, and I assume anybody who's made it with us this far and still listening has a little bit of a dork gene in there too. And as a climatologist, I guess I've gotten pretty used to a lot of the tools that we have, and there are lots of ways to sort through data. So what I like to do is ask this question. Does the condition that we have observed up till now, say up till some arbitrary date, and this time I'm just choosing, where we are in the winter, does that tell us historically, can we learn anything from that behavior about what's coming next? Usually the answer is no. But what I did was I looked at the 10 warmest December 1 through January 15th on record. I used the Twin Cities, but this is actually pretty stable everywhere. And the reason I did that was because it's been warm in December. And it's been warm in really warm in early January. And it's quite likely that we are going to finish by the time we get to January 15th, that first half of meteorological winter is going to be somewhere near the top 10, in the top 10 warmest on record for that first one half. So the question is, okay, if you've got a top 10 first half of winter in terms of warmth, how does the winter on balance perform? What does total snowfall look like? What does it look like in terms of temperatures? And actually, when you have a warm first half of winter, it doesn't bode well for winter lovers like me. You end up with not a whole lot of snow. Typically, you end up with relatively few days at or below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and the lowest temperature of the year tends to be, I guess, a little bit more mild than you would expect in a typical year. So we can kind of get into that a little bit. You might need to prompt me with some of the numbers that I sent you.
So interesting. Okay, the 8 years that ranked among the 10 warmest for the period December 1st to January 15th at the Twin Cities Airport finished the season in those respective years with an average snowfall of 34.9 inches, a minimum of 17.4 inches, a maximum of 66. 4 of those 8 had under 30 inches of snowfall.
So let's put that in perspective. And the reason we only used 8 of the top 10 winters is because 2 of those top 10 warm winters were at a time when we weren't actually, Minneapolis wasn't gathering snowfall measurements yet. So one was the 1877 to 78 winter, which still stands out as the warmest on record by a ton. And then also 1881-82. So the other 8 winters, they didn't get a lot of snow. And that's important because, if the average snowfall for a season for these warm winters is only 35 or so inches, that's substantially below what we normally expect now. Our current normal is right around 50, a little over 50 inches. So we're at a major disadvantage snow-wise. The only season of those that was warm and had a lot of snow was 2001 and 2. And a lot of that snow came in March and April, almost when kind of you think of winter as being over. And that was the one that had 66. But we had some winters with only 17 inches of snow in the 86, 87. So again, we can't say for sure. This doesn't tell you how to bet, but it tells us we don't get a lot of snow when you have a winter that starts out as warm as this one.
Yeah, well, this is interesting because for all 10 of those years, the lowest temperature of the entire winter averaged minus 13.8. The range was minus 3 to minus 19. None of those winters hit a low of minus 20.
Yeah, no, that says something because negative 20, I mean, I know we don't do it much here anymore. And some of that has to do with our changing climate. Some of it has to do with our urban heat island. But it used to be really common. But even when you rewind and just look at, okay, what happened when it was warm, one of the warmer December 1 through January 15th on record, you end up with a sort of winter-long low temperature that's still warmer than negative 20 degrees. That is really something. And would you say the lowest of those was negative 3? Or the highest?
Let's see. No, the average, let's see. The range was a negative 3 to a negative 19, but we never got to negative 20.
Yeah. So basically in 2001, 2002, that same winter where we ended up with a lot of snow at the end, we only went to 0 or colder 2 times. And the lowest temperature that we registered was a negative 3. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, what this tells us is being warm in the first half of winter actually does have some association with what comes next. Usually the coldest time of the year is, the third or fourth week in January, maybe the first week in February, but didn't seem to make much of a difference in those years. So the lowest temperature generally in the teens below 0, and also the number of days where you actually get to 0 or lower averages about 12.
So the trend we see then is warmer temperatures, less snow, but let's try and correlate the two. So would it also be potentially fair and safe to say that perhaps one of the reasons why there are higher temperatures when there's less snowfall, if we take away the actual temperature's influence on the snowfall, is that you have less reflectivity and consequently it's warmer with less snow pack on the ground?
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, you said it, Jim. The snowfall can drop your temperature. So if you have snow on the ground, that can make a difference by about 20 degrees. So if you have snow on the ground in the same air mass, but then same air mass and no snow on the ground, exact same condition, the difference in temperatures could be up to 20 degrees. Some research suggested even higher than that. And so, yeah, that does make a difference. So when it's warm, you're going to tend to have less snow, and then there's going to be a feedback because with less snow, it's harder to get cold, so you're more likely to be warm. But I suspect there's something else going on too, and that would be when you have these warm winters. Many of those winters are El Nino. We're in an El Nino pattern now, and that does drive all the excitement out of our region. And so the heavy snow ends up somewhere else, not here. And then that introduces that snowfall temperature feedback mechanism that you just mentioned. But yeah, it is there's a lot going on in these years, and of course they're not all the same. Some of them are not El Nino. But I think it definitely stands to reason that if it's going to be warm, you're not going to get a lot of snow. If you don't get a lot of snow, it's hard to have it get really cold.
So based on these statistics, then, it's fairly safe to say that those of us who have been on this planet for a while and can recall some really, really cold, nasty winters, say, during our childhood in the 1960s and early 70s, that we're not imagining it when we think that, generally speaking, winters seem to be a little more mild now than what we remember as a youngster.
I think that would be accurate for almost anybody who's, say, over the age of 20.
Okay. Well, hey, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better then. I don't have to quite go back so far in my past. But yeah.
Yeah, no, winters definitely used to be colder, but this also tells us that these mild winters have always been sort of part of our climate too.
Right.
So as much as I like to, we don't need to sound the alarm every time it's warm. Some of this is normal. Some of it is part of regular climate variation. Some of it is probably that the table has been set by our changing climate, so it makes it easier for us to get warm. But yeah, we've had some of this before too.
Are we seeing more El Nino influenced winters recently compared to what there might have been in the last, say, 20 or 30 years?
That's a tough question. I would say no, but it's harder to detect, and we know, or it's easier to detect now. It's harder to detect in the past, but we also are learning more about El Nino, and we know that there's more going on with the ocean and the atmosphere than just this one, El Nino southern oscillation pattern. There are all these other modes of circulation that have various acronyms. So the AMO, or North Atlantic Oscillation, and the Arctic Oscillation, or the Pacific North American Teleconnection Pattern.
It's an impressive title.
Yeah, it's a nice one, right? Yeah. But I would doubt that we've had more frequent El Nino conditions, but there's no reason to assume that this 3 to 7 year period that we get between El Nino events has any basis in reality. It's just when we really started paying attention to them, because we could observe them, that seemed like the interval. But obviously it's based on the ocean, and the ocean is a gigantic fluid, and it's as complicated, if not more complicated, than the atmosphere. So it also makes sense that the first couple guesses that we took at it stunk.
Well, coming up this week, we're going to cool off a little bit midweek, and we do have a storm system that is developing. It seems to be, though, primarily north of the Twin Cities, right?
Oh, yeah. By the time most people hear this, the damage will be done.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's going to be heavy snow on the North Shore. And this was the one thing I wanted to say, is that even though we have not had the typical cold, and we probably won't have, or at least if history is any indication, we're probably not going to have, all-time record lows set this winter. The area in the Arrowhead, which is very dependable for snowfall because they have that lake, Big Lake Superior. Every time the wind blows off the lake and gets driven inland, the air is forced to rise as it goes up the Superior Ridge, and you get snow. And they've had a lot of snow, at least from areas basically parallel to the North Shore in the Superior Uplands have already had, they're at least near normal for snowfall, whereas the rest of us are way down. They're kind of near normal, and they're looking at getting 1 foot to 1.5 foot just off the North Shore. Most of the damage will be done by the time you get into Monday night. Okay. So I doubt that most listeners will be bracing for this because it will have already happened. And then, we will cool down after that, but we got to put an asterisk by that because we're probably going to fall to near normal. So that just shows you how warm. It's going to feel cold, but it's basically going to get us to near normal.
What's that, like a 24-degree high or thereabouts?
So southern Minnesota, think 23 to 27 degrees for a high, lows between 5 and 10. And then northern Minnesota, you can probably drop 5 to 10 degrees off of both of those ranges. And we're just going to end up more like what we would sort of normally expect in mid-January, early mid-January. And then we're going to come right back out of it. Most indications are that, by the time we get to the 15th, we'll probably be at or near the top 10 for warmth for the first half of winter from December 1 through January 15th. And probably will have melted more snow, even if snow has fallen in places like far northern Minnesota.
Well, Kenny, for those who are living in the Duluth area, will this be a memorable storm? Does it look like something that they may talk about a few years from now?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think
so winter continues to disappoint, you're telling me.
So here's the thing. I mean, if we go up to the North Shore, you go up to Isabella. Isabella is not really on the North Shore. It's inland a bit, but it's in the Superior Uplands. They get a lot of snow. So what would impress me and get me talking for a long time, be like, whoa, 15, 16 inches, that's actually not that unusual for Isabella. So the areas that are most prone to snow and getting big snowfalls in the state are also the ones that are going to be affected by this system. And so because of that, displaced city slickers like me would be like, wow, this storm, I'll never forget it. But I think the people of Isabella, the people outside of Grand Marais, I don't think they're going to be talking about this one for years, even though, it's going to cause some traffic issues and dump
Right,
a lot of snow in the
we won't
area.
minimize. I mean, the impact
yeah.
may be significant, but nothing earth-shattering.
Let's spell it out.
Right.
Driving on Highway 61 Monday night is going to suck. Don't do it. I'm talking about north of Duluth along the North Shore. Don't do it. That would be a mistake. But I think that, it's not an unusual storm for that area.
All right. Well, Kenny, we will continue to monitor the winter that has really yet to come. And you and I will get together a week from now and chat some more.
Yeah, if it comes, we'll have something to talk about. Otherwise, we'll just kind of keep beating this dead horse as we talk about
boring
other
weather.
things.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks,
All
Jim.
right. Kenny Blumenfeld is a climatologist. Kenny, we'll see you next week.
Thanks.